What if I told you that creativity has nothing to do with coming up with original ideas out of nowhere, and everything to do with learning how to combine, curate, and create? I'm an artist that's been drawing for more than 12,000 hours now, and I've worked professionally with various companies and won awards. But at first, I also struggled with creativity and trying to come up with great ideas when facing the blank canvas. It took me years to finally figure out how creativity works and that there are actually simple, practical steps that anyone can do today to become more creative and come up with better ideas. That's exactly what I'll be sharing with you in this video. So hopefully you can save some time and level up your creativity without having to spend all those years like I did. By the way, if you're new here, hey, I'm Ori, and a quick thanks to Printful for kindly being today's sponsor. If you're interested in turning your art into high-quality products that you can sell without having to worry about extra fees and upfront costs, check out the link below. So, the biggest misconception everyone has about creativity is thinking that it's all about originality. But that is definitely not the case. Because you could create something completely new, but if no one can understand or connect with it, then it wouldn't actually feel creative. For example, you could open a new canvas, move your brush around randomly, and end up with a configuration of strokes that has never been done before. And it may truly be original, but people wouldn't call it creative. Instead, they'd describe it as random or say that they don't really get it. This is because, in addition to originality, creativity requires people to be able to connect with the work. Connection can come in many different ways. For example, emotion, I can relate to this. Meaning, this says something. Beauty, this is pleasing to look at. Familiarity, I understand what this is referencing or playing with. And usefulness, this helps solve a problem or reveal something new to me. In other words, creativity is novelty plus connection. For example, I often get comments on how creative my VTuber design is, because for a VTuber, normally the character is the one that talks. But with mine, instead of the character, it's the cat on top that speaks and is the actual VTuber. So it has novelty plus connection that plays on the usual expectations people have with VTubers, which makes it feel creative and stand out. So practically speaking, what should we do in order to become more creative? First, it's important to understand that creativity is a conversation. There are currently lots of different conversations going on in the creative space you're in. And you participate by taking in what other people are saying and then adding to the conversation with your own take. That's why, at its core, the act of creativity is recombination. By taking different parts of what's currently being said in the creative space and combining and rearranging them in new and interesting ways, it creates novelty. And because those parts come from existing conversations that people can relate to, it has connection built into it. One of the clearest examples where you can see this is with character designs. Character design is essentially combining different elements to create something that has varying degrees of novelty and connection. For example, it can be as simple as this design, which is a cat girl plus maid plus a shy personality. In the case of illustration, you're combining a character with other elements like a pose, situation, mood, or aesthetic to create a piece that has that novelty and connection. For example, here I took the character Silver Wolf from the game Honkai Star Rail and combined her with different elements related to her theme of hacking and cyberspace. That said, not all art has to be extremely novel to be appreciated or successful as a creative work, because people also highly value the beauty of an artwork, which is an aspect of connection. In fact, with anime art, you'll often find that a beautiful character illustration that is pleasing to look at will often be well received and even go viral on social media, even if the idea itself isn't highly novel or original. But recombination by itself isn't enough, because by definition, most of the ideas we come up with are just average. Which is why we also need to curate our ideas and figure out which ones are the best. So to sum it up, practical creativity is recombination plus curation. Given this, we need to get better at both recombination and curation in order to become more creative. Let's dive into how in more detail. First of all, our brain has two modes of thinking, divergent and convergent. To make things simple, let's call these open and closed thinking. Open thinking is what you use when coming up with different ideas and new possibilities. This is where you're asking, what if? What if the pose was more dramatic? What if I pushed the silhouette of the character more? What if I made the lighting warmer? Closed thinking, on the other hand, is where you narrow down ideas and close down the possibilities until you find the best one. This is where you're asking, which one? Which one feels the most interesting? Which one is actually worth pursuing? So the way to get better at recombination and come up with great ideas is to enhance our open thinking. Here are 3 ways to do so. First is physical movement. You might have noticed that you tend to get stuck when you sit down at your desk and try to force an idea out of your brain. But the moment you go for a walk, take a shower, do some chores, or drive mindlessly along a familiar route, ideas suddenly start to pop up. One reason this happens is because when your attention isn't locked too tightly onto one specific task, your brain has more room to wander and make new connections. So the next time you're going for a walk or doing some easy task that doesn't involve much thinking, resist the urge to fill up the empty space with your phone or other distractions. Instead, just let your mind wander. And if an idea appears, quickly jot it down somewhere or take a voice memo and let your brain go back to wondering. The second thing is to adjust your environment so it's easy to create. For example, you can keep your sketchbook or drawing tablet out so you can pick it up and start drawing anytime. You can also surround yourself with things that inspire you to create. I actually used to have a minimalist setup where I tried to keep my workspace as empty as possible. But during a trip to Japan last year, I intentionally decided to buy a bunch of merch of the anime, games, and works of artists I was a fan of to fill my workspace with. And I've noticed that it feels easier to get in the mood to create now that I'm surrounded by the creative work I love. The third thing you can do to boost open thinking is to reset your state if you're feeling drained or not in the mood. For example, you can put on music you like, take a quick walk, find inspiring references, and get relaxed. Personally, I like to brew myself a cup of green tea and have some dark chocolate to help reset my state and put myself in a good mood. Also, I recommend that whenever you feel inspired, make it a habit to immediately take action and start creating, because that's when ideas will flow most freely out of you. Now, to get better at curation and picking the best ideas to work on, we need to improve 2 things. First is enhancing our closed thinking, which I like to do by asking myself questions about the idea. For example, when choosing which sketch to turn into an illustration, I like to ask myself these 3 questions. How interested am I in making it? How easy is it to make? And how well do I think it will be received by my audience? Answering these help me figure out the quality of an idea based on personal interest, time required, and audience performance, which are the key metrics for me as a professional artist and creator. But this may be different for you depending on your own creative goals. Taste is also important to cultivate because there isn't an objectively correct answer of what is good or bad and right or wrong when it comes to art. So our taste is ultimately what will guide all the creative decisions we make. There's 2 main ways to develop taste. The first is through keen observation of what works and what doesn't. Pay attention to what the best art in the field have in common. And here, you can also define what best is according to your own taste. Also, look at the opposite, what the bad art have in common. The second way is to create things and get real-world feedback on it. This is more effective than just observing because you receive data that is personalized to you and your creations. We also tend to remember and internalize learnings more deeply when it's directly about us, rather than another person. But both observation and creation will help you refine your taste the more you do it. And the more refined your taste, the better your creative decisions will become. Now, coming up with and choosing great ideas is only the first part of creativity. Because no matter how amazing your ideas are, you still need to bring them into the real world through your craft, which, if you're an artist, is drawing. And this is where things can become really frustrating, because particularly early on in the art journey, when you actually try to draw your ideas on the canvas, it usually doesn't turn out anything close to what's in your mind. When this happens, it doesn't mean you lack creativity or talent. It simply means your creative vision is currently being limited by the skill level you have right now at your craft. And skill can always be improved through learning and practice. You also have to first understand the rules before you can break them. For example, if you don't understand anatomy and figure drawing, you won't be able to freely draw and stylize the body the way you want. So the better you get at your craft, the more freedom you'll have to express your ideas and creativity. This is why continuing to improve your skills as an artist is so important, no matter where you're at in the art journey. Now, if you are interested in leveling up your art skills, you might want to join the Anime Art Accelerator, which is the new course I just released. It's designed especially for beginner and intermediate artists who want to speed up their progress. And the premise is simple. It will help you learn and improve your anime art as fast as possible through concise lessons, focused on the 20% that gets you 80% of the improvement, step-by-step quests that tell you exactly what to do next, and stylized references and cheat sheets so you don't waste time reinventing the wheel every time you draw. I spent more than a year making this the best course I could possibly make, condensing my 7+ years of experience and more than 12,000 hours of drawing into it. And so far, more than 1,000 students have already enrolled, and I've received tons of positive comments from them about how much it's helped them improve their art. So, if the accelerator sounds like something you'd be interested in, you can find out more about it through the link in the description. Another reason why improving your craft will also increase your creativity is because art always changes as you create it. For example, whenever I start to work on my ideas, I always find ways to make it even better during the drawing process. It could be as simple as realizing when I'm sketching out the pose that what I had in mind was actually stiffer than I imagined, and I need to adjust some parts like the shoulders or the angle of the head. And it can also be as drastic as realizing my original idea wasn't going to work out, which would force me to make big changes, and I'd often end up with something that was different but better. That's the creative process. As you work on and struggle with your art, you'll naturally bring out more of your creativity. And as long as that creativity is not being limited by your craft, the work will transform into something greater than what you could only imagine in your head. That said, even though improving your skills and technique is really important, it's just as important to not get trapped by them. I had to learn this lesson the hard way because for a long time, I was so desperate to get good that I obsessed solely on improving my technical skills. And over time, I began to forget what it was that I actually wanted to draw and express with my art, and the simple joy of creating. Also, because I was so focused on drawing well, I unconsciously started to stick to the safe poses and compositions that I knew I could draw well technically, and that greatly limited my creativity. It was only when I realized that I had things backwards and that I needed to treat technique as the servant and my creative vision and self-expression as the master that I was finally able to free up my creativity in drawing and truly find my voice as an artist. Above all else, I found that the most important thing we can do to become more creative is to focus on being prolific instead of perfect. According to research done on the careers of famous classical composers, the composers who produced more work were also the ones who created more masterpieces. And I think this is such an important reminder for all of us artists and creatives. Because too often we make the mistake of thinking that we need to make each piece as perfect as possible. And if it's not perfect, we can't put it out. I fell into this trap too, because back when I was in high school, I really wanted to become a manga artist and create an amazing manga. So I'd come up with all these story ideas, character designs, and detailed worlds. But none of it was perfect or good enough. So I'd soon find faults with the idea, put it aside, and start on a different one instead. And with every new idea, I was certain that it was finally the one that would become my masterpiece. But inevitably, I would start seeing the flaws, abandon it, and repeat the cycle again. Before I knew it, 10 years had gone by, and I had graduated both high school and university without creating a single finished thing. Things only started to change when I finally realized that I wasn't going to get anywhere with my current approach, and I forced myself to finish a short manga despite it being imperfect. And that was a big turning point for me because it helped me learn the importance of taking action and creating momentum. And eventually, I was able to become a professional artist in a much faster time than all those years I spent trying to come up with the perfect idea. Because in reality, a lot of creative growth comes from creating and finishing more. So instead of chasing perfection, we should instead chase action. And remember that the best way to become creative is by creating. There's also no better time to start creating art and expressing your creativity because we now live in a day and age where there are no more gatekeepers. For example, these days, your art doesn't just have to stay as an image on your screen. You can now easily turn it into your very own custom products that you can sell by using a platform like Printful, who's kindly sponsoring today's video. Printful is print on demand, which means the product only gets made after someone buys it, so there are no risks or upfront costs. And the way it works is simple. First, you just head over to their website and choose the type of product you want to create. Then you upload your art and customize the design until you're happy with how it looks. After that, you just connect Printful to your online shop, and if you don't have one yet, you can create one for free on a site like StoreEnvy. If you already do, they integrate with all the major platforms like Etsy, Shopify, TikTok Shop, and more. Once you finalize the details, the product gets added to your shop, and just like that, your very own custom product is live and ready for sale. Printful then handles the rest. When someone buys your product, they'll automatically make it, pack it, and ship it straight to your customer. So you can just focus on creating more art and expressing your creativity. Their pricing is also competitive with up to a 55% discount on bulk orders, and they also have fulfillment centers all over the world, so you can sell internationally without extra fees. And if you want to make your brand stand out, they let you add things like insert cards and custom messages. So if that sounds interesting, you can check Printful out through the link in the description. Okay, you now know how creativity works and all the different things you can do to become more creative. But you might find that when it's actually time to sit down, do the thing, and create, you always somehow end up getting distracted, putting it off until tomorrow, or abandoning things halfway through. And then days, months, or even years go by, and you still haven't finished anything. If that sounds familiar, make sure to watch this video next, because in it, I break down why you keep losing to your lazy side and the 5 things you can do to rewire your motivation, stop putting off your art goals, and finally start creating the things you care about. This was Ori. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!